Okay. Yeah. Good. So
Okay,
do
perfect.
you want to start it or do you want me to start it?
Um, yeah, I think if it's you're going on your podcast, then maybe you should start it, and then we can just riff off, and I can guide the podcast. We can go back and forth. Does that sound good?
Sure. Yeah, that sounds good. Do you pronounce your name Abby or Avi?
Avi. Yeah, you got it right. Yeah,
Okay.
Avi.
And do you want me to just say Avi or your full name?
No, just yeah. No, Avi is my full name. So
Okay.
yeah, perfect. Um, make this go away.
Um, how do you want me to sort of introduce you? Do you want me to say I'm here with my friend Avi? We were going to have a discussion about sexuality and
Yeah, so I think a really good way to maybe start it off is just say, "Hey, I'm here. Yeah, I'm here with Avi. We're going to be talking about our sexual culture and our sexual media and how that affects our relationships intimately and non-intimately today. We're going to have a deep dive on that, and then we can riff it off from there."
okay, sounds good. Okay, let me know when you're ready.
Good to go. Can you hear me and see me fine?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Clap. Hey guys, I'm here with my friend Avi. We're having a conversation about sexuality and how it is portrayed in the media and how it's affecting our culture and our relationships. And we've been exchanging emails and talking about this. So pretty excited about the topic we're going to talk about today. So Avi, why don't you tell us a bit about yourself and your background and just what you're all about?
Sure. Well, first of all, I wanted to say thank you so much for having me on, and I appreciate the correspondence. I think uh, what we're doing here is starting a conversation that not a lot of folks are having. So I just wanted to say thank you off the bat. I guess for your listeners, my listeners kind of already know. I am a author. I write about our sexual culture, our sexual consciousness from more of a spiritual perspective, an energetic perspective, not at all a political perspective or an ideological perspective. Although I do critique all of those perspectives. So I write about sex. I write about lovemaking. I write about sexual energy. I write about orgasms. I write about kind of how our media portrays sexual energy today and what that does to our expression, to our sexual expression, to our intimate relationships, to our career choices, because I believe sexual energy affects all aspects of our life. So it's a little bit of context for me. I'm from Los Angeles. I'm also now in the Air Force, trying to continue to pursue my passion in writing. And that's just a little bit about me.
It's awesome. It's a very cool background. And yeah, so I mean,
And
I recently, Avi had found me, emailed me because I had posted a couple videos about my experiences within the adult industry, which the videos that he was mostly touching base about was specifically my experience shooting for facial abuse, which was a very degrading and abusive site that is pretty much posed to humiliate women and have them do things on camera that they will later regret. It's very rough. So yeah, it was just a conversation that I was trying to get out to people that maybe are heading down that road and are at a point where they could have the opportunity to work on camera and do something like that. And I was sort of just trying to give people a heads up that, you know what, exploring your sexuality there's nothing wrong with that. But sometimes doing it on camera, you really might later on wish you hadn't done that, which I certainly did, even though I've learned a lot from that whole experience and took took it as a growing situation that I could later on hopefully inspire other people to not do what I did. But anyway, so that's
so
the background how we met.
yeah, and I guess the inspiration to contact you was Really, because I don't think, as the whole kind of foundation of my work is because I was addicted to pornography. I think I might have mentioned that in our
Yeah,
correspondence.
you did.
And I was addicted from 11 years old to 22,
Wow,
and
that's a while.
it was 10 years. And I didn't realize it afterwards, but the damage that it did to my self-worth and the way that I viewed not only, the people that I was interested in sexually, but it also really shifted my whole reality, all my choices that I made, about, who I chose to hang out with, who I chose to, be with, the person that I wanted to show up in the world as. And so that really, I think, is a testament to how powerful our sexuality is, how powerful our sexual energy is. And it's a double-edged sword. It can go in both directions, as you so clearly pointed out, right? Uh,
Absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, we are sexual beings. I mean, we are
right.
made to reproduce. We are made to have that desires. But I think the biggest thing is having self-control and self-discipline and being aware that your sexuality is a huge conduit of the energy that you allow into your life. And when
Absolutely.
people abuse it or get desensitized or become addicted to like this external stimuli like porn, it can really ruin, like as you said, it can ruin lives. It can ruin people's perspectives on what is healthy and what is desirable, and people become unsatiable when they're constantly watching porn, like nothing is good enough, and they have these crazy expectations. And having worked in porn, I mean, man, I can't even tell you the amount of disgusting messages I've gotten from people, or people that, are in relationships and they're
Mm.
contacting me about it. It's kind of disturbing. um, I mean, sure, it could be a useful tool, I guess, to a degree, if you're a single, lonely person and you don't have the outlet or luxury of being with another person. That I get that, that's why it's there. But when people become so reliant on that and dependent, and they're ruining their relationships because they would rather go watch porn instead of making love or connecting with their partner, I think that's a serious problem. And that's something I actually just recently experienced
Mm.
within my last relationship. My partner was neglecting me sexually and emotionally, and I discovered he was secretly watching porn behind my back. And it
Mm.
was honestly one of the most hurtful things that someone could do to me. And it caused a crazy amount of self-doubt and damaged my self-esteem. And so I just think it's a topic worth talking about, for
Right.
people that may have had addictions, or like you, or maybe going down that road.
Right. And this is why I think our conversation is so important, because rarely do we see in mainstream culture or in our sexual culture, um, a conversation between a consumer, or used to be a consumer of hardcore pornography, and I guess, would you call yourself an ex-adult film star? Is that
Yeah.
appropriate?
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, you could say that. And uh,
Yeah. So, this is such an interesting dynamic, because when I was watching your video, it was like, it was the healing that I never got, because you like broke through that illusion of pornography. I mean, I knew it was an illusion, but I didn't know how deep the illusion was, right? Kind of dissecting all the dynamics of the kind of industry. And there's documentaries out there on Netflix and all those things that go into the industry, but I think you did it in a very authentic and genuine way that a lot of people who might have been addicted, who are addicted to pornography, I think would appreciate. So, kind of adding on to another reason why I contacted you, I think this would be so helpful for the folks that I work with, and say, hey, people who do porn, they're real people, right? Like, they're not, it's like porn creates such a strong identity around the person doing it, the adult star, that all that they get, all the energy that they attract, is kind of this dysfunctional sexual energy coming their way. And I think you said it very, very beautifully in a podcast. You become a fantasy for people. And you're a person with boundaries and feelings and emotions, right? It's so much more complex than, hey, sex on a screen, right? So I wanted to kind of mention that dynamic a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a great thing to bring up, a great way to look at it, just because, I had touched base on this in a lot of different videos I've talked about, or spoken in my podcast, but it creates this really intense stigma, and
Mm,
even though porn is very mainstream nowadays and people are sort of breaking that barriers, like you have actresses that are going mainstream and whatnot, and becoming successful businesswomen. There's still that weight that people kind of carry because they look at you in a way, whereas, oh well, you could subject yourself to doing that and putting yourself out there in such a way. And I guess because a lot of people are having sex on camera, it's a vulnerable thing, right? Because
hmm
you're naked, you're doing something that most people do in private. And so when you sort of exploit yourself in that way, even if you're proud and you're confident, other people may look at you in a way that's demeaning. And for someone like myself, where, porn was never a passion, it was pretty much a job, it was an opportunity that I had. But I always kind of looked at it as just a means to an end, a way to make some financial stability in my life. Um, and once I was kind of in it, it was like, well, shit, I'm kind of in it already, so I might as make the most of it.
Right.
But music and nutrition and yoga, like all these other things in my life, were what I wanted to achieve. It's just that, as soon as I started getting in the adult industry, that's kind of the way people identified me. And it's scary because when people are fantasizing about you and masturbating and watching you, and become just almost like in this trance, like you're this character to them, people lose sight that like you're still a human being, like you said,
Yeah.
with feelings and emotions and a life like outside of that. So that becomes hard sometimes to navigate. You almost have identity crises, where you're questioning, well, how do people really view me? I mean, even paranoia, like that's something I was struggling with for a long time. I mean, in relationships or friendships, or when people would come to my music shows, it was hard sometimes to feel like, okay, what's this person's real intention? Are they assuming that, they have a chance with me because I did porn, or is it, yeah. So sometimes it makes things hard to sort of have a role for yourself because people want to put you in this box.
Yeah, absolutely. And to your point, I just wanted to mention something that you said. Um, I study kind of our sexual culture and our own sexuality in kind of like these three phases, like sexual therapy, sexual art, and something that I call like sexual enlightenment. And when you see a beautiful picture or an artist that draws beautifully, there's people who are going to come and want to see and admire it, right, and look at it, and maybe put up some money in the donation box for the museum. But there's also going to be some people who want to steal it, right? And sexual art is the ultimate expression of our body, and there's a lot of people out there who can admire it, obviously, right? But just like you said, when it's openly expressed for millions and millions of people to see, some people are going to want to try and capture that, right? And be selfish with their sexual energy and try and trap that person who's completely open and vulnerable. And people don't realize that working with sexual energy is exhausting. Like they don't like people think like, hey, okay, I write about sex, I'm passionate about changing our sexual culture. People think like, oh, it's all about pleasure. No, like I have to work with people's sexual pain, like, and sexual trauma and sexual dynamics from childhood. It's it's exhausting working with sexual energy. And I can't even imagine having that in an open environment, excuse me, in an environment where that's filmed and then, put on for, however many people.
Totally. It's strange because in that industry, well, in the industry, like in that setting, like say if you're on set, it's normalcy, like
Mm-hmm.
having that, all that sexual expression is normal and it's expected, like you're expected to deliver this sexual energy all the time. And um, it's sometimes hard in a way where, if you're not really feeling it, or even if you have a day you're not that confident, it's hard to sometimes show up and deliver that. It almost, you don't want it to seem forced, but like you're acting,
Right.
And I just found myself when I was actually regularly shooting and was with an agency and was, in those few years, like when I first moved to LA and I was kind of, head deep in the industry trying to make a name for myself, I found myself just exhausted, and I
Yeah.
had no sex life outside of shooting because it just took so much energy from me. But I was craving intimacy. Like
Yeah.
I craved emotional connection. And I have to say, like it will rob you of your soul over time
Yeah.
if you really aren't careful. And I mean, I know a lot of women and men that have shot for years and they become like a former shell of themselves over time because it's
Yeah.
just you're not like that genuineness of connecting with another human being and appreciating the body. It becomes like desensitizing and almost like devalued, because you're not having like an actual spiritual and emotional connection. um
Y-
and that scares
Yeah.
me, because also, sorry, not to continue,
Oh,
but on this
n-
thought, and
go ahead.
I often think about the generation to come and how sex is becoming so, like the culture is becoming so sexualized. Like,
Yeah.
young girls think it's appropriate to dress sexual and because they think that's what's going to give them attention. They think that's what's going to give them validity and how people are going to accept them. Like they look at their self-worth as their outer appearance. They're like, oh, well, the hotter I am, the more valuable I am. And I think that is a result a lot of the time of porn
Yeah.
because it's become so, on the internet, majority of what people look at is porn. I mean, it's taken over the internet and it's just always so in your face. And it's kind of ruining the idea of having a healthy sexuality. And so that's just something that like I wanted to touch base. And I recently made a video about how I'm even going to go out and say this, which is bold, but I think that it's causing a rise in pedophilia and for rape and things of that nature because people so badly, become obsessive. And even like on Pornhub and X videos and these tube sites, they have all these categories and like, the teens and how
Yeah.
young is too young, oh, fresh out of high school. Like
It's creepy.
it's so creepy. And like they're almost like emphasizing that, oh, it's okay to
Right.
want young people. Like it's okay, to want women that aren't even fully developed and are innocent. Like that scares me a lot as a
Yeah.
woman, and knowing that like these young women to come are subjected to that. But they think that, oh, well, I'm being subjected to this, so I have to be sexual and I have to make myself look a certain way so I can be accepted by society. And like, I just think that's terrifying. So,
Yeah, I mean, you said so many great points. I wanted to hit on something that's kind of maybe not point by point, but kind of like a theme. Um, when you said that people almost like lose themselves the more they're in the kind of industry is kind of what you kind of pointed at, and through some of my research and some interviews and videos that I've watched on the internet, it seems that it's that way, and because the sexual energy isn't being cultivated in an appropriate way almost. And so you literally lose yourself, like you feel empty. And I remember when I was going through kind of like my recovery process, which was very, very difficult, I kind of realized that, oh my gosh, I could have been masturbating to someone's pain. Like, who knows what that person or those people were in that caused them to move into, into the industry, right? Whether it was maybe they were poor and they needed money, or maybe they had mommy issues or daddy issues, right? Kind of this theme. And so I felt the same effects that the adult film stars, or excuse me, the ex-adult film stars were feeling. And I immediately recognized that as kind of like an energy dynamic. Like, oh my gosh, they felt empty. So did I. We were almost pleasuring, quote unquote, pleasuring ourselves to each other's pain. And wanting a validation of some sort. So that was like, something that was kind of really interesting that I thought of, or that I kind of came to. And you're right, kind of like this normalization of dysfunctional sexual content in our sexual culture is so prevalent today.
Yeah.
And I kind of I had a post about this on Instagram, kind of like the 3 layers of our sexual culture. The first layer is like those huge corporate media conglomerates who have, agents, contracts, litigators, people who recruit others into the industry, who kind of, scout. I think they're like scouting. I think you mentioned that, and I saw that on another interview. There's like scouters who scout people from porn. I'm like, that is creepy and toxic and should be illegal.
Oh,
um, and then there's the second layer, which are like the mom and pop, like kind of lower. They're not as big as those huge media conglomerates, but they still kind of do the same thing. And then there's this new emerging third layer, which is like the people who self-produce, self-publish. And I had a theory, and maybe you can talk about this. I have a feeling that third layer, where the self-publishing people who create their own videos, or the camming folks, all of those folks, they if they were in the first layer, they don't own any of the content, right? They don't have their own distribution, the rights to distribute their own content. And so the third layer, I think, came out of the frustrations of the first layer. Now I own my content. I can sell it and do what I see fit with it, right?
yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, and that's something that I think I spoke about a little bit in the facial abuse video, where a lot of these companies, they work with girls that are usually in agencies, and they don't own, when you shoot with a company, say like Brazzers, right? Or Evil Angel, whatever. I'm just throwing out some companies. Um, they will have you sign a contract that you do not own the content, that they own it, and you get paid a set amount for that day. No residuals, nothing off, no royalties. So you find these people that, it's just like, okay, yeah, 12,000, $1,200 for the day, and but then these other companies that, well, the company that they're shooting for, continue to benefit for years and years and years, or however long that video is just circulating through the internet. And the worst part is sometimes too, is that, say for instance, videos that I shot when I was 19 and 20, and I'm 28 now, they will, as my social media grows in other areas, like say with music, and I continue to kind of expand my identity in a different way, they will latch on to your growth and just keep pushing out that old content, because, oh yeah, look at Felicity Feline, she's going in this direction, but she shot for us when she was 20, and they almost have this against you.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's what these companies like facial abuse were doing. I mean, and that's a very terrible video that I shot when I was young. And I mean, it's embarrassing for me to have that out there, but there's really nothing I can do about it, because I don't own the content. I mean, unless I wanted to go get a lawyer and have to deal with it that way. But they have just been continuously pushing that out as they watch me grow as an individual. And I just think that is entirely fucked up.
It's almost like energetic sexual abuse, like
Yeah,
you know,
100%.
and I feel like it should be protected under some sort of statute in our law, because messing with a person's sexual energy is can be deeply traumatizing and hurtful.
Absolutely is.
Yeah, and so I don't think there are the appropriate laws in place to protect people from even just signing contracts, because if we understand sexual energy is dynamic. Boundaries change day to day. What was okay sexually yesterday might not be okay today, right?
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
so let's say person A goes in and signs a contract of X things to do, and the next day they just don't feel comfortable. There should be some sort of law, like a catch and release law, where, hey, no, this is a no-go for me. Obviously I don't understand the nuances of the industry, because I focus more on kind of like the spiritual side of things. But yeah, I mean, what your take kind of on the dynamic changing of sexual energy and boundaries would be really great to hear from you, actually.
Well, that's an excellent point, because I mean that was something I was really trying to push out with the facial abuse video I made, the aftermath, is that, you know, when I was young, I was extremely explorative and curious, and
Hmm.
I wanted to do things that, sorry, that car was kind
That's
of,
okay.
there was things that I wanted to do that I had boyfriends and partners that they didn't really want to do it with me. And it was kind of, you know, taboo. Like I was always curious about having really rough sex and just seeing what it would be like to be completely submissive, you know. And a lot of girls that, I don't want to just say girls, a lot of women or people fantasize about that. Almost like how some people have these rape fantasies, right? You know, I mean, they exist. But I was at this point in my life where I was very explorative. And so when I had that opportunity to shoot for that company, I was impulsive for the money, but also just the fact that I'm like, oh, whoa, I mean, I guess this is an opportunity for me to try this. And I didn't really think about the consequences that, wow, my sexual exploration is now going to be all over the internet for anyone to watch. And
Right.
that year, I shot for a few different BDSM companies, and I quickly learned that it was not what I wanted. Like it is not what I liked as in a sexual pretense.
Right.
I mean, I am a very sensual person, and it was just not for me. Like it didn't get me off. I didn't enjoy it. So it's really awful sometimes knowing that people look at me in this light, probably assuming, oh, wow, what a whore. She loves that, you know, when it was 8 years ago and I was in a completely different stage of my life. And that is just something that people really need to be aware about that. And I was trying to express that, where it's okay to have these desires and the curiosity to explore your sexuality, but really make sure if you want to do that on film that you are 100% okay with that and that being out forever. I
Right.
mean, some people don't have that awareness of that fact.
And I feel like, you know, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like, you know, certainly there's a percentage of folks who get into the industry because of their bad past. Maybe they had a bad relationship, or maybe they had childhood problems with their parents, or, you know, things of that nature that kind of led them maybe to have some sort of like validation from others, validation from an audience or a fan base. Certainly we can see that in social media today, right? I think we've turned into a really kind of self-indulgent culture at this point. So, you know, kind of how, you know, and again, like, how do I know, how does a consumer of pornography know that they're not masturbating again to someone's like pain, to someone's, you know, trauma?
Exactly. And honestly, I mean, companies like facial abuse, they should be banned. They really should. I mean, because not only, okay, like the whole topic, the whole subject of abusive porn is questionable in itself, but the
Agreed.
fact that these companies, and I experienced it firsthand, they'll interview the women and make fun of them and try to get them to admit things on camera because they're in a vulnerable position. They have a camera in their face, and these men are intimidating and antagonizing them to say stuff that they'll really regret, and, you know, expose issues that they might have. And the fact that they're trying to exploit people's deep rooted insecurities is so disgusting. And I mean, they asked me questions in the interview like, oh, you don't have any daddy issues, no one ever touched you when you were a kid? And I'm like, no, no.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Because personally, I don't have any trauma like that in my childhood or anything, but there's women that have.
Right.
You know, maybe unfortunately they made some decisions and they were in a position like shooting for an adult video that they're exposing that. And now people can look at their pain and see that, and people are getting off to that.
Right.
I just
Right.
think that's so toxic, and it's creating this environment and this way people look at sexuality where it's like, oh, what a dumb whore, you know, look at her telling about her issues, instead of approaching the topic with empathy.
Right.
People are looking at it as a way to hurt people, and it's okay.
And I think also, to your point, the conditioning that happens when people consume pornography or sexual content for that matter, there's this like, and I can even remember it as young as 11. It's so gripping. It's so gripping. And it conditions you to believe in limited sexual systems that pornography puts in place. And it puts like sexual energy in like this small box, and it's like this dysfunctional box, like where nothing's right, everything's confusing. Um, and I remember, kind of growing up in this kind of, because I'm a millennial, I'm also 28 years old. I grew up in this, in kind of the beginning phases of like this brand new high speed internet pornography that only got stronger and stronger and stronger and faster and faster. And I can remember the conditioning that it did to me. It made me believe things about myself and about other people that were completely wrong and toxic. And that same toxicity that you're talking about is directly reflected in my experiences as well. And again, bringing it back to why this conversation is so important, we need to kind of have this conversation so people know, hey, listen, you need to really take a serious look at what you're consuming online, whether it's sexual content or any content for that matter.
Absolutely. And I mean, people don't even realize too, it has effects on you. I mean, what you're looking at, what you're reading, what you're listening to, all of that has an effect on your psyche. It has
Right.
an effect on your perspective towards life. I mean, whether you're aware of it or not, I mean, it's often in a subconscious level that will slowly emerge. And something that when I was kind of saying before, how the generation to come, I mean, not just young women, but also porn and this whole sexualized culture is also really affecting young men and making
Absolutely.
it seem like it's okay to, like these young men are getting addicted to porn and they think that sex is like this, or these women have to do this. And, they look at women as these just things that you can just do whatever you want to. And they're not like regarding people as beings that have
Right.
thoughts and feelings. And
And
it,
boundaries.
yes, exactly. And I feel like it's not allowing young men to have natural relationships and develop a natural sexuality on their own. I mean,
Right. And which is why I think there's a huge division between men and women today.
yeah,
And we can see this in the dating marketplace, which I believe we don't even have a dating culture anymore. We can see it in the dating apps as well, right? It's everything's kind of been slightly energetically pornographized, if I can say it that way. Like
totally.
the editing, even if it's clothes on, even like the edit, men and women, everything has this like slight like vibe of, oh my gosh, I remember I watched that video like 10 years ago. You know what I mean?
No, 100%. I mean, it's creating this gap between people where it's like this sexual tension. And,
Right.
like it's like this power play almost where, oh, well, they, like a woman, whatever she does, it's like, oh, well, how hot is she? Like,
Right.
what does she look like? Like everything is based on appearance and look. And, a woman might have more value, like I was saying before, if she is more attractive. And I mean, even in politics, you see it, like, it's just, it's creating this like superficial scope where people view each other. Like it's
Right.
no longer about developing a connection. And it's almost like, well, what are you worth? You know?
Sexually.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And even like fame is associated with getting laid, and just sex and, what they can attain. Oh, like I'm famous, I have these followers, I'm going to get laid more, I have more access to pussy. It's just that whole mindset is so toxic. Like people have lost the incentive of passion and doing things just based on its own merit, when, they're just associating everything with sex. And I think it's really ruining the idea of having a monogamous or healthy relationship. Not even monogamous, but just a healthy relationship
Right.
where two people are satisfied with each other.
We've almost lost like the humbleness of our bodies in a way, like this
Yeah,
innocence, humbleness, like, I'm going to show up in this sexually expressive moment with you as who I am, right? As a being, like you said. We've almost lost that, and it instead, our sexual culture has kind of like entered our body and taken over the controls and is doing it for us in a way that that can hurt other people. A lot of the things that you mentioned, this took me a few years to get down, but when I stepped out of pornography, consuming pornography, hardcore pornography from these huge media conglomerates, I also rejected my like raw primalness inside of me. And I realize now that that was a mistake, because as much as there is dysfunction in pornography, as much as the relationships in pornography are very almost shallow and cause you to believe certain things that are not true, the small sliver of truth that I think pornography exploits in us is this kind of like raw primal sexual energy that is very satisfying for people, right? Kind of like that raw, deep taking of someone and of loving someone in a very primal, raw way. Some people will call that rough sex or whatever, but it's even deeper than that. It's like this primal way of taking someone and of being sexual with someone. There's truth to that. That is something that is satisfying for people. But I think pornography takes that primalness and just completely blows it up in a completely different direction. So I wanted to say to maybe your listeners or my listeners, if you're stepping out of consuming pornography, remember, don't throw away that, because that's your power. That's your strength. Keep that. Just throw away, dissolve the layers of dysfunction that are sitting on top of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And a friend of mine, we talk actually a lot about this, where I like to describe the sexual energy as arrows, like this passion that people have. Some people have significantly more of it, and it's kind of how you utilize it. And for instance, I have a very strong arrows. And if you want to relate arrows as the passion, like I'm a very intense, passionate person, and it comes out a lot within my sexuality. So that's why, in a sense, shooting porn was kind of easy for me because I had a lot of that energy. So I just kind of put it out. But being able to, as you said, cultivate that and put it towards healthy relationships and healthy connections towards other people, I mean, that's where it should be going. That's what we should be focusing on. And two things that I wanted to talk about was, I kind of wanted to talk about how you even became addicted, and like when you realized it was kind of spiraling out of control, because I feel like that is the slippery slope, when, especially for younger people, they start to watch porn and they realize like, oh my God, this dopamine release, the serotonin. And I mean, it's a drug. It is a drug, this external stimuli that people become so obsessed with. And there's a website, Your Brain on Porn, and it discloses like this whole idea that, these companies are tapping into this. Like, they know that it's addictive. They know that they can target young men that are vulnerable, that maybe single men or men that are in relationships that, they're maybe not as attracted to their partner. And these companies are targeting these type of people because they know that they can latch on to their little amygdala brain, and tap into that primal space and become a satisfying addiction for these people.
Right.
And I think that's just so dangerous. It's almost like tobacco companies latching on to vulnerable people because they know that they can do it.
Yeah.
And so I just think that it's always going to be there. Like, sex is always going to be out there, but I think people need to have the ability to control that and know that, okay, like this is here, but I don't need this. Like I can be passionate and have, a good relationship. I don't need to rely on this or become addicted to this. So I want to get into that. But then before we do though, I just wanted to bring up one more point. So I don't
Sure, go ahead.
Is that a big thing? And I haven't posted this video yet, but when I was hiking last week, I made this video. It was just thoughts that came to my mind. So I had to record it like while I was outside. And basically the idea that I think that they should raise the age of people shooting porn. I think that 18 years old is too young. And if someone did want to shoot at that age, if they were so dead straight on doing it, I think that they need to have an adult co-signer that's over 21.
Absolutely.
Someone to at least be there as a voice of reason and step in and be like, okay, you can do this because you're 18 years old technically and you're becoming an adult, but remember that this is a severe decision. Like if you're going to do this, it may impact the rest of your life. I mean, if you have to be 21 years old to buy alcohol, who's
Right.
to say that someone is of the right mindset to shoot porn that will content that might be out there for the rest of their lives and potentially cause damage down the road that they can't take back?
Yep.
So I just think that raising the age would be a valuable way into helping control the culture of sex. And even like I have producer friends that work in the industry and they're porn producers, and they tell me when they see sometimes these 18-year-old performers come on set, they're creeped out. Like they genuinely are uncomfortable because these women or men are too young. Like they're too young, and sometimes at 18 years old, you don't even know what you're doing in life. Like you're
Right.
confused. You don't know what direction you're on. I mean, not everyone, but most people that age, especially like nowadays.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it almost turns into an obsession that spirals way out of control. I mean, you become obsessed with sex, you become obsessed with people, your relationships become toxic. I mean, the sexual energy that gets exploited just surrounds you. It infiltrates every single aspect of your life. And I realized that when literally it was withdrawing from a drug. I kid you not. It took me years. I mean, still sometimes I get triggered. I see something on TV or like a sexual piece of content on Instagram or something like that. I get triggered a little bit. So you're absolutely right. It is a drug. It's like an energetic drug that is just like hammered down into our primalness, right? um and so yeah, I mean, this obsession factor is insane. It's very much insane. I think raising the age to 21 and having a co-signer is absolutely the correct move. Listen, I can't go out there and say stop porn, no more sexual content. It's not going away. There's way too much behind it. There's way too much money behind it. And also, I don't want to turn my work into like an ideology or a belief system.
Right.
I just want to maybe talk about the truths and talk about the perspectives. um, so yeah, I wanted to get into, I'm sorry, did you have a point before? Because I wanted to ask or create a conversation around a different theme.
No, I mean that was kind of just
Okay.
what you were saying was just the base of it. I mean, like, I don't, I'm not trying to say that this is bad and this is bad. It's just a matter of like this. It's right. Like there's always going to be drugs and alcohol
Right.
available, right?
Right.
It's your ability to be able to control yourself with these things,
It's
and sexuality is something that you have control over, and you need to develop a warrior like mindset where you use it in a healthy way and you never let it get the best of you.
right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. And such a powerful energy. It's such a powerful energy. And obviously, like, look at all the evil that it can do as well, right? In terms of sexually exploiting people, in many different ways. I wanted to get into, because this is such an interesting topic, especially in today's environment with the pandemic, especially with the rise of that third layer that I was talking about, kind of the people who are starting to self-publish their own content and distribute it as they see fit. I love talking about sexual art and how our bodies, not only, how we can sexually express ourselves with, by ourselves and with a lover, but if it's possible to actually create sexual art with our bodies through media. And when I asked this question, the immediate first thing that came up to my mind was, well, how is that possible? Pornography like almost ruined my life, right? And that was through media, that was through a screen. But the new content creators that are rising up from the current global environment, their content feels much more grounded, authentic, and personable and relatable than the huge media conglomerates. And I think, and I don't know, do you think there's a way to create a deeper sexual consciousness in our culture with the new kind of, I guess, generation of not amateur sexual content creators, but these newer sexual content creators?
Yes, I think so. And from my personal experience, like having started in the industry where I solely worked for companies where I didn't own the content, like having that background, which more often than not became a negative. Wow, it was loud. Became a negative aspect. I mean, not being able to control what content gets out there and where it goes is not really a comforting thing,
Right.
especially like we said before, when it's, you might have filmed things when you were younger and had a whole different perspective on something, and then as you got older you're like, Jesus, I wish I didn't shoot that. What was I thinking? So when it comes to like when OnlyFans and many vids and like these self-publishing sites came out, or even your ability to make your own website, when these options became more available, I always found it great, because now it's people are in control of what they want to put out there, and they're creating it themselves. They're working with who they want to work with. There's no one telling them, oh, you have to do this, you have to do this. And that, I think, is beautiful. And it's also allowing the consumers, I guess, if you want to look at it, be able to choose and connect what they want to see. So for instance, I mean, the OnlyFans thing has become huge,
Right.
and people are not just following someone's OnlyFans because they want to see the sexual content, but they're doing it because they like their personality. They like their lifestyle. I mean,
Something that porn never shows, by the way.
exactly. So it's almost become this subscription of someone's personal life. And, like my followers on OnlyFans, for instance, and sometimes, I've gotten called a hypocrite because, oh, okay, I'm not really in for shooting for mainstream companies anymore, but I still have my own content. And it's tricky because this is something too that I think is worth noting, that when you're in the industry and you're used to making an income from that way, which, for the most part, when you're young, you can, if you're smart about it, it's a pretty lucrative thing, at least initially.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was sort of kind of getting that comfortable income from adult work, it was hard for me to completely transition out. And so when OnlyFans kind of came around, I was able to make this residual income every month and not even really have to think about it. Like just put some content here and there out that I made. That's very hard to just walk away from. And it's almost like, oh, well, I have this option. I have the ability to do this. So why wouldn't I take advantage of this? So I feel like it's almost become this option too for people that maybe don't want to dive too deep into porn. Like maybe they don't want to shoot for mainstream, or they don't want a webcam. They don't want to do whatever, but they have the option to make their own content. If people want it, they can get it. And then they can, guess what? They can shut it down whenever they feel like, and they're in control of it. So I think that is a beautiful thing, because it's allowing people to have more freedom to do what they would, but a controlled freedom. Like they're able to control what is getting out there for viewers to see, rather than a porn company shoots you and, say you didn't look your best that day. Like, how many times I've shot for companies and then see the video months later and I'm like, oh, like I don't look good, or I'm like, shoot, what was I thinking doing that? Like, because in the moment when you're filming, you're in the moment. You're not trying to overthink like, oh, I shouldn't moan like this, or, I have razor burn on my butt, like you're not thinking about that too much because you're shooting and you're working. But then when you see that down the road and like you have no say in being able to take that down, that's a fucking horrible feeling.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and again, I think what's going to happen is I think we're going to see more of people's sexual expression than we've ever seen before. I mean, we're already seeing it, and I really am curious to see what new types of sexual expression there's going to be. Hopefully, it's not going to turn into kind of a dysfunctional hardcore media conglomerate pornography type of way. But to be in all honesty, some of the sexual art that I've seen couples create, even just by camming, I've been very just like, wow, actually that's not bad. I mean, there's kissing, they're talking, they're not even having sex. It's just like intimacy. It's not even sexual art. It's just intimacy for once. In my life, I've seen something that's intimate on the internet, and it was beautiful, right? It was a very beautiful way of being sexually expressive with a lover. So I think what's going to be interesting in this next decade is how people are going to create more sexual content in a way, hopefully, that's more sexually conscious, that contributes to our sexual consciousness and doesn't add toxicity to our sexual consciousness.
Exactly. And I think that kind of touches base where it's almost like artificial versus natural, right? Because
Right.
if you're, most porn on the internet is manufactured in a way that's not natural. There's lighting, there's moves, there's dialogue, you're working with someone that you maybe probably don't even know, so it doesn't often feel intimate or natural. And I mean, not to say like, sure, there's some stuff out there that isn't like that, but majority of it is not. And so I feel like it's almost creating this image, what we were saying before, the consumers perceive sex in this way because they're so used to watching content like that.
Right.
So for someone,
How
for the whole OnlyFans thing and the subscription based models of putting content out, I think will help people see that, like, look, wow, these people are making their content themselves and it's them in these intimate settings and they're working with people that they want to work with. And it's often much more natural. You see people in their natural elements. I mean, I know, for instance, even, my content that I have on my OnlyFans is very, I kind of do it in a very authentic way. Like, it's just like, I like to capture things in my regular life. And, if I'm with, well, my ex, whatever, or whatever, my partner, it's just like what it would be if a camera wasn't there.
mhm.
You know what I mean? So people get to see that private experience. And I think that's what really should be emphasized. When people get to watch intimacy between two people or how many people, they realize like, wow, yeah, I want that. That looks great. Like, I want that feeling. I want that connection, that natural feeling that these people have. I mean, at least it's creating a more healthy picture of how sex should be realized.
Right. And you don't get all of the kind of self-worth, doubt, insecurity things that come up, because I feel like a lot of the times when we're looking at our sexual culture, movies, pornography, etc., it's almost like it's almost like they expose our insecurities. Well, oh man, I don't look like that. I can't. Can I not fuck like that? Can I not bend over like that? Am I not as big as the other person? It creates so much of these insecurities that come up. And for the longest time, and to be completely honest with you, I didn't feel worthy of sex. I because all I saw was what these people, what pornography, hardcore pornography showed me. And not, no one's like that. That's not real.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, even, okay, like with some partners I've had, or people ask me, well, like, what do you think the appropriate dick size is? And I'm just like,
Yeah.
oh man, like, I mean, like, I feel so bad for some of these men that like compare their penis size to what they see in a porn video. I mean, it's just, it's such a delusion that's created.
Right.
And even like women, I feel terrible about where, a lot of these, I don't want to say a lot of these, but a lot of people that work in porn, they get work done. They're very, their body is their work. So it's like they want to look a certain way for camera, and they want to be a little over the top, lip injections, fake tits, I mean, I have fake boobs, but just saying, like, a lot of times women feel like they can't compete. Like, they're just like, oh,
Yeah.
well, I'm never going to look like that. I'm never going to be as hot as that. My boyfriend's never gonna like me or look at me in that way. And that's terrible. Like, that is
Right.
so terrible. And that's why, like, I feel bad for couples that, the man is watching porn behind the woman's back. And I mean, if it's like, okay, the woman knows about it and they're okay with it, then whatever, that's a whole different story. But I feel like majority of the couples, when the man is watching porn, it's usually a secret, or it's usually behind the woman's back. And then, he's watching this, he's used to seeing women in this way. And so then when he goes to have sex with his wife, he can't get hard, or
Right.
he's not able to be that into it because he's used to seeing these other people on film. I mean, that actually personal experience. I mean, I had a roommate years and years ago who was addicted to porn, and he wasn't very physically taking care of himself. Like, he was a bit overweight, and
Mm-hmm.
he told me this one day because he started dating this girl that was cute, you know, and like attractive, but she wasn't, you know, like, didn't have a porn star body, like, if you want
Mm-hmm.
to look at it that way. She was, you know, a little overweight and nice, but he said he couldn't have sex with her because he was
Yeah.
so addicted to porn and seeing sex in this way that when he tried to have sex with her, he just couldn't get into it.
Yeah.
And I think that
Absolutely.
that's like an epidemic that's really happening. Like,
Yeah. I think we need we need to question the huge media conglomerates who produce porn. I think there needs to be, I mean, we need sex that inspires and deepens our hearts. We need sex that inspires and deepens our minds and our bodies. And we need a sexual culture that recognizes each other, that sees each other for who we are. Again, bringing it back to the beginning, as beings. How do I show up in a sexually expressive moment with you or whoever in a way that brings my maybe brings my maybe brings my pain in a conscious way, maybe brings my love, maybe brings my doubts, my insecurity. How do I bring all those things consciously to the sexual expressive moment and to the intimacy, in a way where it's not reinforced but it's loved? Right? It's cultivated and loved, and it dissolves. All the insecurity and stuff goes away, and the love grows and deepens in the body. That's the type of sex we need. The type of sex we have is the opposite. How much more dysfunctional can I make you, and how much more love can I take away from you?
totally, totally. And instead of becoming more comfortable with our bodies, it's creating more adversity with ourselves. I mean, people are becoming more insecure. They're comparing.
Mm-hmm.
That is a huge thing, especially with women. It's become so competitive. Like, it's like this competitiveness that exists. I mean, not just women, men are very competitive too with each other, but with women especially, because it's like you're competing for the male, you know, you're competing for the male attention, and it's like, oh well, you know, I'm hotter than you, or, you know, like, everyone's just comparing their bodies and comparing, you know, what is this. And, you know, the one thing too about porn is that it creates, I think, like an addiction and this ability to become desensitized, because there's so much out there that people
Yes.
are just like, oh well, I can do this, I can watch this, I can watch this, and they can literally watch like anything they want, and it becomes like the options that they have becomes this addiction. Like, oh well, tonight I'm going to do this, tonight I'm going to do that, you know, instead of just sort of focusing on maybe what you have in front of you. Maybe you have a beautiful partner that you can explore with and in person and for yourself, instead of just watching content online.
Right. Right.
I feel like people are losing that ability to have deeper connections. I mean, it's even just not even porn related, but even like with technology, with the cell phone. I mean,
Yeah.
people with texting, people don't call people as much. People aren't having conversations as much where they look each other in the eye. I mean, everyone is on their fucking phone. And
Right.
it's like creating this space between people where it's like, oh, reality kind of sucks, I'm just going to go on my phone and avoid reality, I'm not going to be present. And I mean, that's something that disturbs me too. You know,
Yeah.
people are not present anymore, like, because they have this alter reality right here in their hand that they can
Right.
escape to whenever they want. um,
Right. And I guess I'm coming from the point of, okay, so we have these things. So how do we present sex in a sacred way to them? Right. How do we present, how do we transform our sexual culture to show the sacredness of sex, to show the sacredness of sexual energy, to show that you can use your sexual energy not only for intimacy, but to grow your business, or to cultivate deeper friendships and relationships, or to dive deeper into orgasm and pleasure and lovemaking and all these things. We don't have that foundation. And I think you, me, some of the other people that are having these conversations, some of the other content creators, we're building that foundation now. And I think we're early in the game, in my opinion. I think in this next decade coming into, the 2030s, I think we're going to see a huge shift in the way people use sexual content, consume sexual content, and talk about sex. And that's my hope for hopefully creating, that kind of deeper sexual consciousness and transforming our sexual culture.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%.
Do you,
You know, and
do you, oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead. I was just going to say, I think it's just, really being able to create awareness and that we're in control and we have to have self-control about our decisions that we make. And if it's going to be beneficial to ourselves and to other people.
Yeah. I was going to mention 2 points. The first point was you bringing up the ever changing hardcore pornography landscape that is different pieces of content, right? Kind of moving into how young is too young and the teenage genre and the amateur genre and like all of that stuff. I did a little bit of research and I found that hardcore, or excuse me, the media companies that produce these types of content often show people who are in sort of I think all of it is a power dynamic, but in a subordinate relationship to the person who's having sex with them. So sometimes they're like pool boys, or like they're delivery drivers, or they're like an Uber driver, or there's some sort of like they're in the service industry. And I went onto some statistics online, and I saw that a lot of the sexual harassment, a lot of the sexual uh, abuse that happens in the service industry. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, hardcore pornography shows these relationships a lot. And I wonder if there's a connection between that and actual sexual harassment in real life. It was just something that I thought about. Obviously, there's no research behind that, but I kind of wanted to gain your thoughts on that.
That's a really good point. Yeah, I mean, I would question the same thing, and I wouldn't doubt it,
Yeah,
honestly. Because it's like what I was saying before, where people watch these films, watch or see these things, and they, maybe consciously are not being like, oh yeah, but subconsciously it's doing something to your brain, and you might not
yeah,
even realize it. But say, you're in the position where it's like almost creating these fantasies for people that with everyday situations, oh, the babysitter, the pizza delivery guy, whatever it is, like it's
right.
creating
The
these,
maid.
yeah, like it's creating these sexualized fantasies, the nurse, like that becomes, it's become so realistic now, where
Right.
when you're actually in person, people are, there's this sexual tension, like what I was saying before, like because
Yeah.
people are so used to seeing these situations in porn or in sexualized conditions that when it's actually happening in reality, their brain goes back to that.
Yeah. And it's justified because, of course, the nurse is supposed to help us, right? Of course, the delivery person is supposed to bring us something to make us feel better. So the sex is almost like a justification for their job inherently, which I thought was such an interesting dynamic. Which is why I think which is why I think hardcore pornography exploits those relationships over and over again. And so when I looked at the statistics of sexual assault, um, the top three were service industry, the medical services, and again the subversion of the service industries, like your waitresses or et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah,
So yeah, it was very interesting.
absolutely. I mean, and that kind of also goes into play where the underage theme, right? Where
Yes.
the helpless 18-year-old fresh out of school, oh, she's lost, she doesn't know what she wants to do with her life. And, you have this man coming and saying, oh, I can show you, I can tell you how to do this. It's like creating this submissive type of perspective on young girls, like, let's prey on these young girls because they don't really know what they're doing, they're innocent, I can easily take advantage of them. And I think that is seriously a doorway to pedophilia.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
like that there's no other way to look at it. I mean, it's just creating this gross idea that like it's okay to prey on young girls. And you see it too even in society with the whole grooming, like the underage grooming, where you see these actors and comedians like getting their shows are getting canceled because they're hitting on underage girls. And um even the, you know, you see these child pornography rings, these child rings, you know, like how many documentaries about politicians and stuff are coming out where
Right.
people are having sex with underage girls because they have power and they use
Right.
that power to take advantage of people that are attracted to that.
Right. And that's all we see in pornography. We see that same power dynamic play out over and over again.
Yep.
And even Netflix, I don't know if you caught this a few months ago, but Netflix released a movie called Cuties. And there was a whole controversy with the poster because it was literally sexualizing 11-year-old girls. They were like bending over and doing all these things. And I looked at it and I was like, how is this even possible? This is Netflix. This isn't even a pornography company.
Oh my God, it's so funny you brought that up because actually in the video that I made that I'm going to be putting out, I was listening to a podcast. I'll send
Mhm.
this to you. Aubrey Marcus, this guy, he was the CEO of this nutrition company called On It, but he has a podcast. It's great. He always has amazing people on there just to talk about really deep spiritual topics. And he had this CIA agent on that specialized in busting child pornography and underage sex trafficking. And they started talking about that movie, and the man said he, as actually a part of work, they were supposed to watch it, and he said he was so disturbed that
Oh my
even
God.
though the producer is claiming she was trying to promote a good thing, like she was trying to promote that underage people, this shouldn't be happening, the content is still right there. So she was still shooting these underage people in this way. Like
Right.
she was creating these images and videos for people to see. So you know that the people that are already inclined to be attracted to underage women or people, this is like a gold mine for them.
Right.
They'll keep watching that movie over and over again. That's like free porn to them. And,
Yeah.
and, and just seeing that visual out there on a mainstream platform, people are going to be like, oh, you know, I saw that young girl in a movie like that, so it's okay, you know. Like it's becoming a normal thing, and it
Yeah.
should not be like that.
And this comes back to the question of our sexual morality. What is sexually wrong and what is sexually right? And I feel like there are clearly things that are sexually wrong and there are things that are sexually right. But oftentimes that message gets conflated in our culture because sometimes I get the, hey, you're shaming my kink line. You know that line?
Oh,
And, and I'm like, that is such a conditioned response that culture has taught you because our sexual culture tries to keep us in its grips and
mhm.
it has defense mechanisms. And one of these defense mechanisms is to shame you into thinking that you're victimizing that person who has a specific kink or sexual fetish. And the second that turns dysfunctional is when you start arcing into the illegal or questionable stuff.
Yep.
And like, pedophilia, underage pornography, I mean, all completely illegal and sexually immorally wrong, obviously. um I think we've lost that. We've lost what is sexually right and what is sexually wrong. And I think pornography has just done the hardcore pornography has done such damage to our sexual energy that it feels like we can't grip back to a place of just balance, not even sexual polarity, just balance.
Absolutely. Like it's creating a breeding ground for people to have addictions and unhealthy obsessions with things that might not even be, you know, a typical sexual thing. I mean, like you said, like these things that are obviously wrong, you know, and it's creating also for people to have these secret desires and
Right.
hidden desires that
Like what?
they can't talk about in person, but they know that they can go online and find it because there's other people that are into the same thing. And that, and
Right.
that's creating a toxic perspective towards sex.
I mean, we've had, there's so many examples in movies today. I mean, just a very, very obvious example, 50 Shades of Grey. The basic storyline of 50 Shades of Grey is a man who was sexually abused as a child and then as he grows into adulthood, he wants to project that sexual abuse onto another person. That's basically the storyline of 50 Shades of Grey. And
Yeah,
how many people have seen that movie over and over and over and over again, kind of trying to embody the same type of sexual styles in their own sexual expression? And I'm like, yo, hold up for a second. This is coming straight legit from pain. This is coming from a person's trauma. Even if it's a story, the energy is still the same. So, there's so many of these defense mechanisms up in our sexual culture that our sexual culture tries to keep you in the illusion, if you will, and not veer off into like the sexual truth.
totally.
So yeah, something I just wanted to bring up.
No, that's an awesome point. It's like romanticized. The
Right.
idea, like, people look at 50 Shades of Grey as like, oh, this is a sexy movie. But I mean, are you, like you said, are you really
Paying
aware
attention.
of the actual intention behind this movie and like the underlying theme in it? But
Right.
I hate to say it, most people aren't really enlightened enough to kind of see past what they just are watching on the screen. And it's creating images that are okay. I mean, that's why the movie, like Cuties, majority of the people that watch it, they're not going to have these deep philosophical realizations about sexuality after watching that. They're going to go home and be like, whoa, yeah, I mean, those 11-year-olds, I mean, they're
uh,
just like that. I mean, I guess that's okay.
right.
I mean, it's like creating an opportunity for people to think that way.
And I think there's not a lot of, I've studied the kind of the ancient China, ancient Tibetan sexual theories and practices, which are so beautiful. There's so much beauty in a lot of those practices. Why, I don't understand, with so much sexual dysfunctional content, why don't we have guidance on sacred sex? Why isn't there a place where I can point to and say, hey, here's a way how to appropriately, here are the tools, here's how to use sexual energy appropriately. Go create, right? Go manifest, go be sexually expressive with your lover, right? Create a deeper, better world using your sexual energy. It's just so interesting to me that all of the dysfunctional stuff is normalized. All the truthful stuff that we talk about is like almost shunned, right? It's like almost not normal. Um, so there was just like an interesting dynamic there, that I also wanted to attach onto that.
Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, that's actually a good idea, to create almost a safe place where people can explore their sexuality in an instructive way. I mean, that like almost like a therapeutic school, where couples or individuals could go to kind of just learn more about their sexuality and understand it and appreciate it and become comfortable with themselves.
Right.
I
And,
mean,
and take it, and have it be structured where it's like, hey, here's sex throughout many different cultures in time. Here's ancient Rome, here's ancient China, here's the medieval ages. Here are studies of different sexual theories and practices. Oh, men, did you know that you can have orgasms without ejaculating? Here's that practice for you. Hey, women, this is how you do, ovarian breathing. This is how you move sexual energy in your body. This is how you move it with your lover, right? These are all such important things to a culture that needs to have a deeper sexual consciousness. And I can't express how important that is. That's really been like the core, I think, of my work in recent years. So I'm so happy I'm able to like, you know, bridge the gap between us in terms of like talking about our, experiences from the opposite sides. It's just so fascinating.
yeah, no, absolutely. I agree. It's refreshing to it's always refreshing too to like talk to a male, because usually males are the ones that are looked at that, oh, because most men, it's more so men that become, addicted to porn and so
Right.
be on the other side. But I guess it's like I've always been aware of my sexuality, like in porn and without porn. And I guess like having worked in a lot of different industries and porn being one of them, I just want to take my experiences almost like I'm an investigative reporter
Yeah.
and just take all those experiences and exploit them to help other people learn about what it's really like in the inside,
Right.
you know?
And again, I know there's been so many like documentaries and things done, but I feel like this is so much more relatable because it's just two people talking, right? It's not, the interviews and shots and edits, right? I think these are the not to discount the other conversations, but these conversations just feel so much more authentic for people's healing. And if even one person can listen to this and say, oh my gosh, I was going down a path that I didn't want to go down, right?
Yeah.
Either whether they're a consumer or a person thinking about the industry, I think that's a win. I think that's a huge win in cultivating, a sexual consciousness that's just much more aware and deep.
Yeah, no, 100%. I agree. But hold on, Avi, 1 second. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
no
I
problem.
heard something outside.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Belly.
It's fantastic. Yeah, sexual.
Sorry about that.
All good. I can edit that part out.
Okay, cool. You have
Uh,
5:30, you said?
yeah, so I have about 10 more minutes.
Okay.
I think we built, such a good foundation in our talks. Yeah, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, no, I feel great. I enjoyed this a lot. I just wanted to kind of though maybe um you could just shortly describe, I mean, because you didn't touch too much on it, but just your experience of the spiral of getting addicted and then the
Sure.
realization of when you had a problem and then what it was like coming out of it, and then maybe some advice to people that are trying to get out of their addiction.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's kind of like the opposite of your story, almost in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I remember when I got my first like computer, and I was like 11 years old at the time, and I think I just hit puberty early, so the hormones just started raging. Obviously, so much sexual energy, and I can't remember. It was one of these sites that I think I had found on my own, um, because I was always obviously like interested in girls, and I wanted to see more and more and more and more. So I went onto one of these sites, and just to like set the mindset that I was in, one of these sites was like tricking women into having sex with the adult film star because of their disability. So the person like would like fake that they got hurt somehow, and then that would make the girl feel bad for them, and then have sex with them.
Oh my God.
And that was like my introduction to sex, right? What a fucked up dysfunctional way to introduce an 11-year-old into sex.
Yeah.
And that explains why I felt so guilty all the time. That explained why I felt so like not worthy of sex, because in a way it like disabled me, like actually disabled me. And so that continued and spiraled into I almost hate giving them publicity, but the bigger sites, right? The evolution of those sites as I grew up got bigger and bigger and bigger. And there was different sites that came up, new content. I was in that porn evolution, or the pornography evolution, where all the different flavors started to evolve. You had the amateur, you had the MILF, you had the like just like these like weird like ways of having sex that seemed normal to me at the time because I was so used to the conditioning already. So I kept consuming and consuming, and I remember I would be masturbating 3-4 times a day, like just every day almost, for 10 years. For 10 years,
Wow.
it got to the point where I had really bad anxiety and depression, and I got into inappropriate relationships with people, and it started to affect me so much so that I had panic attacks. I remember this when I was 18. I think I had 2 or 3 panic attacks every day for a year until I went to college. And it was so hard. It was so difficult. And I didn't realize where this source of pain was coming from. So I kept consuming and consuming throughout my teenage years. And then I went to college,
Quick
and
interjection though, when you were saying inappropriate relationships, um, this is like romantic relationships, and were they aware of your addiction?
No, they weren't aware. And I was trying to make them romantic relationships, if that makes sense. So I was interested in someone, but that person that I was interested in was like, you know, as insecure as I was. So I was attracted to their insecurity. I wanted to fix them. I wanted to help and mold them. I wanted to be attached to them because I didn't know how to have a healthy relationship. I didn't know the dynamics of that. All I knew was what porn gave me, and that imprinted onto me and onto my relationships. So everything that I did in a relationship, whether it was romantic or not, was coming from that place, was coming from this insecurity, coming from all of these dysfunctional dynamics. The inappropriate relationships, some people way older than me. Obviously, that was very, very not good. I was interested in people that just were not right for me at all. Not right for me at all. It was bad. It was very bad. Um, and then when I was 22, after college, I came back home to Los Angeles, and I remember waking up one morning, and I had the most craziest realization. I was like, "Oh my gosh, I think it's pornography. I think that's what has done so much damage to me in my life." And I had an incredible shift that day, and I um, I did some research, and I found Your Brain on Porn, that website that you mentioned. And then I found the NoFap community, which is men who quit porn and stop ejaculating to reset their body. And then after that, I fell into the ancient ways of sexual healing and sexual art and sexual expression, and that blew me away. Totally resonated with me. I knew I didn't want to do talk therapy or traditional talk therapy because that never worked for me. As soon as I started learning and the practices about moving sexual energy, doing breath work with your sexual energy, learning how to have orgasms without ejaculating, oh my God, so much healing just entered my life. And sensual touch, body work that was done on me was so critical because I never received that. And so all of those things helped me get away from that, from the obsession that is pornography. And it was very difficult. It was very, very difficult. I mean, it was like withdrawing from heroin. I mean, not that I've ever done heroin, but it felt like it. It felt like a really just hardcore drug. And I remember I had cold sweats, weird dreams. I wouldn't be able to sleep. I'd be jittery. I mean, it was insane. It was insane. So that's kind of like the time, or excuse me, the progression of when I started and when I kind of made that transition into, oh my gosh, I need to change this about me because it's affecting my life in such a deep way. But when I came out of it, I realized, well, what do I do now? Everyone else is addicted. There's no one that's going to relate to me. So it was like banging my head against the wall, doing this work, writing and creating content, because I love writing about sex. There's just something so beautiful about it that I just enjoy so much, consciously, obviously, right, in a sacred, spiritual way. That really became like my relationship to sex, discovering and writing and talking about it and creating conversations with people. And I realized, like, oh my gosh, I'm not the only one. Like, I could help people. I can hopefully maybe change and transform our sexual culture into a sexual culture where love making is happening. Love making is happening. Sex is happening in a way in which we're recognizing the divine in each other, where we're experiencing oneness, where before we were separated and now we're experiencing oneness. So, long story short, that's kind of like the progression.
Wow.
Yeah. And I mean, I've made the sacrifice, obviously. I mean, I spent all my money on self-publishing books, right? And editing, and I built a fantastic audience. Um, and, joining the Air Force to continue my passion.
Yeah.
I think, as maybe as a testament to my will of trying to change the way our sexual culture is, because I think honestly, there's diminishing returns on pornography. People are going to experience the same type of pain you felt and the same type of pain I felt, and they're going to look for a different solution. And I don't think that solution can be found in our sexual culture because it's not there right now. It's going to be found in the people who are trying to create the conversations, maybe ancient wisdom, sacred sexual morality, becoming more aware of your sexual energy and how it's being used, etc.
Absolutely. And I think it's conversations like these and people speaking out about it will help others become aware that, wow, okay, maybe I do have a problem, or
Right.
maybe this is worth fixing in my life, because I think a lot of people don't think it's a big deal, like
Exactly.
they just think that it's just a normal thing in society. Oh, I mean, how many times have you heard people say, oh, everyone watches porn, who doesn't?
Right.
I mean,
Right.
it's just, actually there are people that don't, or actually you don't really need to watch it. I mean, I'm not saying like, okay, if you have a very healthy outlook on it, that's a different story. But majority of people, I think it causes more damage than positive reinforcement.
And they don't even know, just like me, just like you, right? They don't even know the damage that it's creating. And that's just it's such a shame because sex is a gift.
Yep.
It's such a gift. And it's like coming down on Christmas morning and there's no Christmas tree and there's no presents.
Yeah, I mean, it's why, right, churches and religion try to deem sex as bad, is because through sexuality you can reach transcendental experiences. You can
Absolutely.
achieve self-peace. You can understand your body and your heart more. And they were using that as a fear tactic, like, oh no, you can't do that. You have to believe in the church. Like, you receive transcendental experiences through the church and God. And I mean, you can connect with the divine through
Right.
sexuality, but it's your ability to navigate through it and see it as a healthy outlet rather than just something, oh, I need to jerk off. It's just people's relationship with sex. It needs, in many cases, it needs to change. It needs to become a healthy outlet that helps you connect you deeper to yourself rather than make you run away from who you are.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, some of the most incredible figures in history, Mother Teresa, Jesus Christ, Saint Catherine of Siena. I mean, these were individuals who harnessed sexual energy on a deep level, right? And they just shined. You could see it in their skin. They glue. So, how do we take a population sexual energy and do that? Right? How do we make it where our sexual expression is no longer being used out of insecurity and fear, but how do we use it so that we can inspire people to
Absolutely.
to create, to make love, to better communicate, to better relate, right? That's what I want to know, and that's what I want people to have. If it has to come through self-published content and creators, okay, let's do that. But what are the dynamics in place to get that going, right? How do we do that through media, or through conversations like this, or through talking to someone on the street? That's really what I want to know. And I think you do too, right? I think we're on the same path.
Absolutely. And I'm super glad that we connected and we were able to talk about this. And, you know, I look forward in connecting with you more and talking more about this. And,
Yes.
perhaps something can grow from this, and, just slowly try to create a movement, for people to kind of be a part of and just become aware about. I mean, awareness is everything, and what
Yes.
you do with your awareness is your ability to have self-control and self-discipline, and know that, okay, like, this is serving a healthy purpose for me, and I'm going to use this wisely.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I definitely, of course, if you're interested, I would love to do another podcast in the future, because there's so many things we can dive into, so many things we could talk about and explore, with all of our experiences combined. I think that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm 100% down. So we'll stay in touch and figure that out.
Cool. Well, I wanted to say thank you so much for having me. I deeply appreciate it. And yeah, and thank you so much.
Yeah, no, thank you too. I'm very happy you reached out, and I look forward to what's going to happen in the future. So I'll talk to you soon, and have a good night.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay. So I paused it, or I stopped the recording.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, awesome.